The space station was massive. It stretched across the darkness like a city made of metal and light. Ships came and went from its many docking ports, carrying soldiers and officers from dozens of different species. This was the Galactic Coalition Military Academy, the most famous training center in known space. Every species that wanted to prove itself sent its best warriors here. Today, a small human ship approached Dock 17. It was not an impressive ship. Compared to the elegant vessels of the massive warships of the, it looked plain and simple. But the 12 people inside that ship were about to change everything the galaxy thought it knew about combat. Lieutenant stood at the front of the group. She was 31 years old, not very tall, with black hair tied back in a tight bun. Her eyes were sharp and always watching. She had served in 3 different conflicts on Earth before being selected for this mission. Behind her stood the rest of her team. Sergeant was the biggest of them, a quiet man with thick arms and a calm face. He rarely spoke, but when he did, everyone listened. Corporal was taking pictures of everything through the window, her eyes wide with excitement. She was the team's engineer, but she had the curiosity of a child seeing snow for the first time. The others had their own stories. Private was the youngest at 22, always smiling, always making jokes even in serious moments. Private was a sniper, patient and focused. Private was small but fierce, trained in close combat. Private was their medic, gentle with his hands but tough in his spirit. The rest filled out the team with their own skills and personalities. When the ship docked and the doors opened, they were greeted by Director. She was in being, tall and thin, with wings that shimmered in different colors. Her species, were known for their intelligence and their fragile bodies. She looked at the humans with what recognized as nervousness. Her wings kept twitching. "Welcome to the Academy," said through her translator device. "We are honored to receive the first human military cohort. We have prepared special accommodations for your species." "Thank you, Director," replied with a polite bow. "We have adjusted many things for your comfort," continued. "The atmospheric mix in your quarters has more oxygen. The gravity has been reduced to match your home planet. The temperature is kept stable. We have also removed certain light frequencies that we learned can damage human eyes over time." Looked back at her team, raised an eyebrow, stopped taking pictures. "That is very kind," said carefully, "but we would prefer standard station conditions." Swing stopped moving completely. "I am sorry, I do not understand." "Standard conditions. Whatever everyone else uses. We train better when things are difficult." "But," checked her, "standard station conditions include gravity that is 1.3 times your planet's normal level. The temperature changes between hot and cold throughout the day cycle. The air contains trace elements that cause irritation in many species. It is designed for the hardiest beings in the Coalition." "Sounds perfect," Sergeant said. Stared at him, then at the rest of the humans, who all seemed completely relaxed about this information. "You are certain?" the Director asked. "Absolutely," smiled. It was a friendly smile, but there was something behind it that made wings twitch again. "Also, we would like to register for the combat endurance test." The silence that followed was so complete that could hear the station's air recyclers humming in the walls. Translator made a strange sound like it was trying to process something it could not understand. Finally, she spoke again. "The combat endurance test is our most difficult evaluation. It has a very low success rate. Perhaps you would like to begin with something simpler. We have basic combat assessments, physical fitness tests, tactical simulations." "We have reviewed the available programs," interrupted, still polite but firm. "The combat endurance test is why we are here." "Lieutenant," said slowly, "in 300 cycles, only 11 species have ever produced graduates from that test. The average success rate is 3%. The who are considered the greatest warriors in the Coalition have only achieved 12%. Many candidates do not survive." "Do not survive the test?" Private asked. or do not survive the training. Both admitted. Looked at her teammates and shrugged. So it is a real test. Good. I was worried it would be too easy. Made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a cry of distress. It was hard to tell with species. I will process your registration, she finally said. The next test cycle begins in 3 days. You will receive your briefing tomorrow. Until then, please rest and adjust to the station. She turned and walked away quickly, her wings buzzing with what was definitely anxiety. When she was gone, Corporal started laughing. Did you see her face, her wings? I thought she was going to fly away. She is scared for us, Private observed. She thinks we will die. That is reasonable, said calmly. She does not know what we are. Looked out the large window at the station around them. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the corridors. Some were huge, with armored skin and claws. Some were small and quick, with too many eyes. Some floated instead of walking. Some had tentacles or wings or bodies made of what looked like living stone. They were all products of their own worlds. They had evolved to survive their own environments, face their own challenges, overcome their own dangers. But none of them came from Earth. Earth, where the weather could kill you in 100 different ways, where the animals had spent millions of years becoming perfect predators, where even the smallest creatures carried poison and disease, where the plants could be toxic, the water could be deadly, and the very sun that gave life also caused cancer. Humans had not evolved in a gentle place. They had evolved in a world that was constantly trying to kill them, and they had not just survived, they had thrived. They had spread across every environment their planet offered. They had climbed the highest mountains, crossed the driest deserts, and sailed the most violent oceans. They had learned to eat poison, to befriend predators, and to turn danger into entertainment. The galaxy did not know this yet, but it was about to learn. Get some rest, told her team. Tomorrow we find out what this test is about, and then we show them what humans can do. The team moved toward their assigned quarters, chatting and joking like they were on vacation, instead of standing in the middle of an alien military academy that expected them to fail. Director watched them on the security monitors from her office. Her assistant, a young named, stood beside her. Director said quietly, should I notify the medical bay to prepare for human casualties? Watched the humans laughing as they walked. One of them, the young female called, had started some kind of game where she tried to step on the other's feet while they walked. Yes, said, but I have a strange feeling that we may be preparing for the wrong species. The briefing room was designed to frighten people. The walls were dark metal. The lights were dim and cold. The seats were hard and uncomfortable. Everything about the space said the same thing. This is serious and you should be afraid. Instructor stood at the front of the room. He was one of the most feared species in the coalition. His body was covered in thick scales the color of dried blood. His eyes were yellow with black slits in the center like a snake. His hands ended in claws that could tear through metal. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. The room was filled with candidates from 7 different species. They sat in a cluster near the back, their crystalline bodies catching the dim light. The massive reptilian warriors took up an entire row with their bulk. The 4-legged beings covered in protective slime, huddled together nervously. 3 other species did not recognize filled the remaining seats. And then there were the humans, 12 of them, sitting in the middle of the room, looking around with curiosity instead of fear. Welcome to the combat endurance test briefing, growled. Many of you will not complete this sentence by the end of the first day. Some of you will not survive the week. If you wish to leave now, you may do so without shame. The door is behind you. Nobody moved, but noticed that several of them were trembling. The test spanned 7 rotations, continued. That is approximately 168 standard hours. During this time, you will face simulated combat scenarios, environmental hazards, sleep deprivation, resource scarcity, and psychological warfare. The simulation is designed to push you beyond your limits. It will find your weaknesses. It will exploit your fears. It will break you. He paused, letting his words sink in. Elimination occurs in 3 ways. First, you may surrender. Simply speak the word yield and you will be removed from the test. Second, you may lose consciousness. If you fall and cannot rise, you are eliminated. Third, your vital signs may indicate imminent death. The system monitors all candidates at all times. If it determines that you are about to die, it will remove you automatically. Private raised her hand, stared at her. In 300 cycles of running this test, very few candidates had ever raised their hand during the briefing. Most were too terrified to speak. "Yes," he said. "Sir, what counts as imminent death for humans?" asked. Her voice was casual, like she was asking about the weather, because our species has a strange relationship with that concept. His yellow eyes narrowed. He picked up and looked at the information on human biology that the coalition had gathered. "Explain," he said. "Well," said, "we can lose consciousness from lack of oxygen and then wake up again. We call it passing out. Happens at parties sometimes. Also at high altitudes. Also when we stand up too fast. Also when we see blood for some people. It is usually not a big deal." Looked at us again. "This is true." "Yes, sir." "And you can lose significant quantities of blood without dying." "Define significant," Sergeant said from his seat. Scrolled through the data. His scaled face did not show much expression, but thought she saw something like concern in his eyes. "It says here that humans can lose up to 40% of their blood volume before death becomes likely," he said slowly. "That sounds right," Private said. He was the team's medic. "We can also receive blood from other humans to replace what we lost. We call it a transfusion. We have been doing it for over 100 years. You share blood?" "Yes, sir. Also organs. If one of my kidneys fails, another human can give me one of theirs. We can live with just one. Same with lungs. Same with parts of our liver, which actually grows back after we cut pieces off." Set down his. He looked at the humans for a long moment. Then he looked at the other species in the room, who were staring at the humans with expressions ranging from disbelief to horror. "The parameters of the test," said carefully, "may need to be adjusted for your species." "Please do not make it easier," said. "We want the real test." "Lieutenant, the real test has killed candidates from species far more durable than humans appear to be." "With respect, sir," said in his calm, deep voice, "you have not seen what humans can endure." Studied the sergeant. Sat perfectly still, his face relaxed, his hands resting on his knees. There was nothing threatening about his posture, but something in his eyes made pause. "Very well," the instructor said. "The test will proceed as designed, but I am required to inform you of additional data before we continue." He pressed a button and images appeared on the wall behind him. Statistics, charts, numbers that represented failure and death. In 300 cycles, 47 species have attempted this test. Only 11 have ever produced graduates. They have the highest success rate at 12%. The average for all species is 3%. The mortality rate is 4%. The permanent injury rate is 11%. The candidates made soft sounds of distress. One of them actually stood up and walked out of the room. Nobody blamed him. "For the remaining candidates," continued, "you will begin the test tomorrow at first light. You will be given basic supplies and weapons. You will be placed in the simulation environment. From that moment until the test ends or you are eliminated, you will receive no outside help. The system controls everything. It will test you in ways you cannot predict." He looked directly at the humans. "I have read your species' history. I know about your wars, your disasters, your ability to survive in hostile environments. But this test was designed by species who have been fighting across the stars for thousands of years. Do not assume that your experience on one small planet has prepared you for what is coming. Met his gaze without flinching. We appreciate the warning, sir, but where we come from, assumptions get you killed. We do not assume anything. We adapt. Held her gaze for a long moment. Then, for the first time, something that might have been respect flickered in his yellow eyes. We will see, he said, dismissed. As the candidates filed out of the room, the commander approached. He was enormous, nearly 3 meters tall, with scales that looked like armor and teeth that looked like knives. His name was, and his species had dominated the combat endurance test for 200 cycles. Human, he rumbled, you speak bravely, but bravery alone does not survive this test. I understand, said, looking up at him without fear. What does survive it? Considered the question. The will to continue when your body screams for you to stop. The ability to ignore pain, fear, exhaustion. The refusal to yield even when yielding is the logical choice. Smiled. It was a small smile, but it carried weight. On my planet, she said, we have a word for that. We call it Tuesday. Stared at her. Then he made a sound that might have been a laugh. I look forward to seeing if your actions match your words, human. Perhaps you will last longer than I expect. Perhaps, agreed. Or perhaps you will learn something new about what is possible. She walked away to join her team, leaving standing in the corridor, wondering for the first time in his long career if he truly understood what he was about to witness. The simulation environment was a masterpiece of suffering. It stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, generated by technology so advanced that it was impossible to tell what was real and what was fake. Mountains rose in the distance. Forests spread across valleys. Deserts burned under artificial suns. And all of it was designed to break the candidates who entered. The first challenge began at dawn, 40 kilometers of hostile terrain. The ground would shift between scorching sand and frozen tundra without warning. Acid rain would fall from the sky at random intervals. Predator drones would hunt the candidates, forcing them to fight while they marched. The goal was simple: reach the checkpoint before the time limit expired. The delegation started strong. Their crystalline bodies were beautiful in the morning light, and they moved with grace and speed. But within the first 10 kilometers, the temperature shifts began to take their toll. Their bodies could not regulate heat quickly enough. One by one, they collapsed, their crystalline shells cracking from the stress. By kilometer 15, all of them had been eliminated. The lasted longer. Their forelegs gave them stability, and their protective slime helped with the acid rain. But the slime could only do so much. By kilometer 30, the acid had eaten through their protection. Their skin began to burn. Their leader called for surrender, and they were removed from the simulation. They pushed forward with brutal determination. Their armored scales protected them from most hazards. Their massive bodies generated enough heat to survive the cold zones, but even they struggled. By kilometer 35, 2 of their 6 members had fallen behind, too exhausted to continue. And then there were the humans. Instructor watched the monitors in the observation room. His assistant, a young named, stood beside him with a recording everything. Sir said slowly, the humans are singing. Leaned forward. On the screen, the 12 humans marched in formation through a frozen wasteland. Ice hung from their eyebrows. Their breath came out in white clouds, and they were singing. Their voices rose and fell in rhythm with their steps, a strange melody that had never heard before. What are they singing? He asked. Consulted his translator. It appears to be a song about a woman who left someone for a man with a better vehicle. The translation is imprecise. They are being hunted by predator drones. They are marching through lethal cold, and they are singing about romantic problems. Yes, sir. As watched, a drone dropped from the sky toward the human formation. Without breaking stride or stopping his song, Private raised his weapon and fired. The drone exploded. adjusted his aim and shot down a second drone that had been approaching from behind. Then he continued marching and singing as if nothing had happened. "How many drones has he destroyed?" asked. 17, sir, in the last hour alone." The humans reached the checkpoint with time to spare. They were tired, cold, and hungry, but they were all standing, all 12 of them. The 4 remaining arrived 20 minutes later. They looked at the humans with something between respect and confusion. Their commander approached. "You did not lose anyone," he said. "No," agreed. "The march was difficult but manageable." Manageable tasted the word like it was strange food. 14 candidates were eliminated on that march. You call it manageable? "We have a saying on Earth," Sergeant said. "What does not kill you makes you stronger. This did not kill us." Day 2 brought the starvation protocol. No food, limited water, continuous low-intensity combat. The simulation would send endless waves of enemies, just barely weak enough to be defeated. The goal was not to test fighting skill. It was to test endurance. How long could a soldier keep fighting when their body was screaming for rest and food? By hour 12, only they and the humans remained active. Every other species had either surrendered or collapsed. By hour 18, they were struggling. Their massive bodies required massive amounts of energy. Without food, they were beginning to slow down. By hour 30, made a decision. His species had an ability called conservation mode, a hibernation-like state that allowed them to survive long periods without food. He ordered his remaining soldiers to enter this state. "We will wait," he told before his eyes closed. "Wake us if something changes." The humans did not hibernate. They did not have that ability. Instead, they did something that confused the observation room completely. They started playing games. "Is that candidate trying to defeat enemies while standing on one foot?" asked. "Yes," said. "And that one is fighting with her eyes closed." "Yes." "And Private appears to be dancing." On the monitor, spun and jumped between enemies, her movements flowing like water. She was not just fighting, she was performing. Every kill was part of a routine, every dodge was part of a dance. "She claims it keeps her energy up," reported. "She has been awake for 30 hours. She has not eaten in 24. She should be collapsing." Humans apparently evolved on a planet where they routinely stayed awake for 16 hours at a time as a baseline, sir. Extended periods of wakefulness are considered recreational. Was silent for a long moment. Then he said something he had never said in 300 cycles of running this test. "I do not understand these creatures." Day 3 pushed the test further. The environment became more hostile. The enemies became stronger. The temperature swings became more extreme. Sleep deprivation began to affect even the strongest candidates. They woke from their conservation mode weakened but alive. They fought alongside the humans, but the difference was clear. They were surviving. The humans were thriving. Corporal had found a way to modify her weapon using parts from destroyed enemies. It now fired faster and hit harder. She had done this while under continuous attack, using only a small knife in her bare hands. Private had treated minor injuries on 3 teammates without ever stopping his own fighting. He had developed a system where he would shoot with one hand while bandaging with the other. Sergeant had not spoken more than 10 words in 3 days, but he had eliminated more enemies than anyone else in the test, including the commander. His face never changed. His breathing never quickened. He simply kept fighting hour after hour like a machine that did not know how to stop. And Lieutenant coordinated all of them. She moved through the battlefield like she could see the future, positioning her people exactly where they needed to be, calling out warnings before attacks came, turning chaos into order. On the evening of Day 3, approached during a brief rest period. "I have fought in real wars," he said quietly. "I have faced enemies who wanted to kill me. I have led soldiers through battles that lasted for days, but I have never seen anything like your people." "Thank you," said. It was not a compliment, it was a confession. His yellow eyes studied her. "I am beginning to think that my species does not understand what we are competing against. You are not just enduring this test, you are enjoying it." Considered the question honestly. Not enjoying exactly, but we are built for this. Our bodies, our minds, our history, everything that makes us human was forged in struggle. When we face hardship, something inside us wakes up. We become more than we were. "That is terrifying," said. "Yes," agreed with a small smile, "we know." In the observation room, made his first report to director. "The humans have not lost a single candidate," he said. "They are not showing signs of breakdown. If anything, they appear to be getting stronger." Wings fluttered with anxiety. "What do you recommend?" Was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I recommend we watch very carefully, because I am no longer certain that we are testing them. I am beginning to think they are testing us." Day 4 introduced the element that broke most species. Physical challenges could be overcome with strength and endurance, but psychological warfare attacked the mind, and the mind was much harder to defend. The simulation AI was ancient and intelligent. It had studied thousands of species over hundreds of cycles. It knew how fear worked. It knew what made soldiers break. And it was very, very good at its job. It created enclosed spaces. The crystalline beings needed open air and light to feel safe. The AI trapped them in darkness, in small rooms with walls that pressed closer every minute. It filled the silence with sounds of their dying. Within hours, the remaining candidates had surrendered, their minds shattered by horrors they could not escape. It created isolation. Their species lived in herds. Being alone was their deepest fear. The AI separated them, placed each one in an empty space where they could hear their companions screaming but could not reach them. The screams were fake, generated by the system, but they could not tell the difference. They broke within a single day. It used the sounds of their young in distress. Even the mightiest warriors had children. Even the strongest hearts could be broken by the cries of the innocent. 2 of the remaining 4 surrendered when they heard what sounded like their own offspring begging for help. And then the AI turned its attention to the humans. It started with darkness. Complete, absolute darkness that pressed against the eyes like a physical weight. The AI had learned that many species feared the dark, feared what they could not see, feared the predators that might be hiding just out of reach. Private found herself alone in a corridor of pure black. She could not see her hands in front of her face. Strange sounds echoed in the distance. Growls, scratching, the wet sound of something large breathing nearby. She stood still for a moment. Then she shrugged and started walking forward with her hands out in front of her. "Hello," she called out. "Is something there? Because I cannot see anything, so if you are trying to scare me, you should know that I grew up in a small apartment with 2 older brothers. I have seen much worse than darkness." The AI increased the intensity. Predator sounds grew louder. Hot breath seemed to touch neck. Something brushed against her leg. Spun and punched in the direction of the touch. Her fist connected with something solid. There was a grunt and the sound of a body hitting the floor. "Got you," she said with satisfaction, "whatever you are." In the observation room looked at. She just knocked out a simulated predator with her bare hands, while blind. "I see that," said. "Sir, the predator was designed to trigger a flight response. It was not meant to be engaged in combat." "I see that too." The AI tried a different approach with Private. It showed him images of injury, of violence, of broken bodies and flowing blood. These images had caused soldiers from other species to freeze in terror, unable to continue. Looked at the images with a blank expression, then he yawned. "Is this supposed to scare me?" he asked. "I was an emergency responder before I joined the military. I have seen worse on a slow Tuesday." The AI showed him worse, much worse, images that would haunt most beings for the rest of their lives. Actually leaned closer to examine the details. That is very realistic. Good job, but the blood color is wrong. Real blood turns darker when it is outside the body for more than a few minutes. You should fix that. The AI paused. It was not designed to receive feedback on its fear simulations. It moved on to Sergeant. For him, it chose fire. A wall of flame surrounded him, burning hot, filling his lungs with smoke. Fire was a primal fear for most species. The heat, the light, the pain of burning, these things reached deep into the survival instincts of almost every living creature. Was found by the observation cameras, warming his hands over the flames. Your species is experiencing a significant thermal threat, the AI announced through speakers. Your flesh will begin to burn in approximately 30 seconds. I know, said calmly. It feels nice. It is cold in here. You should be afraid. I will be afraid when I am actually on fire. This is just warm. The AI increased the temperature. Warnings flashed on the monitors in the observation room. Skin was beginning to show signs of heat stress. Sir said urgently, should we intervene? He is going to get burned. Wait, said watching carefully. Finally stepped back from the flames, not because he was afraid, but because the heat was becoming uncomfortable. He examined his hands, which were red but not blistered, and nodded with satisfaction. Good warmth, he said, thank you. The AI made a sound that might have been frustration. Your species has an abnormal relationship with pain. We invented something called spicy food, replied. It causes pain when we eat it. We eat it for fun. The AI went silent. For 3 hours, the observation room received no data from the psychological warfare system. When investigated, he found that the AI had been attempting to process the concept of recreational pain. It had searched through every database it could access, trying to find another species that deliberately caused itself suffering for entertainment. It found nothing. When the AI came back online, it tried new approaches. Heights, drowning simulations, the feeling of falling, social rejection, public humiliation, every fear it could generate drawn from its vast database of psychological weakness. The humans responded to each one with varying degrees of confusion, amusement, or mild annoyance. Lieutenant was presented with a scenario where she failed her team. She watched simulated versions of her soldiers die because of her decisions. The AI expected guilt, grief, psychological breakdown. Watched the simulation with a serious expression. Then she said, "This is useful training. Can you run it again with different variables? I want to see what happens if I make different choices." The AI, because it did not know what else to do. Corporal faced a simulation of her worst memory, a time when she had failed to save someone she cared about. She sat down in the simulation and began to cry. The observation room waited. Finally, a breakthrough. Finally, a human was breaking. But then wiped her eyes, took a deep breath and stood up. "Thank you," she said to the empty air. "I needed to cry. I have been holding that in for a long time. I feel much better now." She walked out of the simulation, looking lighter than she had in days. Private faced the most intense psychological assault the AI had ever generated. It combined every fear it had gathered from every species, creating a nightmare of darkness and fire and isolation, and predators and failure and death. Laughed. "Oh, this is good," she said, clapping her hands. "You really tried hard. I appreciate the effort. But you should know humans tell scary stories for fun. We pay money to be frightened. We have entire buildings dedicated to scaring people for entertainment. We call them haunted houses. This is a little scary, but honestly, I have been to better haunted houses." The AI shut down the simulation. "I cannot process this species," it announced to the observation room. "Their fear responses are abnormal. Their survival instincts are broken. They do not react to threats the way living creatures should react. I have concluded that either my programming is flawed or humans are not fully sane. Looked at the screen showing the humans. They had gathered together during the psychological phase, supporting each other, sharing stories, even laughing at some of their experiences. "It is not your programming," he said quietly, "and they are not insane. They are something else entirely." "What are they?" the AI asked. Thought about everything he had witnessed in the past 4 days, the singing during the death march, the games during starvation, the fire warming, the laughing in the face of nightmares. "They are what happens when a species evolves on a world that is constantly trying to kill them," he finally said. "They have been afraid since the day they were born. Their entire history is fear, so they learn to live with it. They learn to use it. They learn to make it into a friend instead of an enemy." He paused. "They are not fearless. They simply understand fear better than any species we have ever encountered, and that makes them more dangerous than any of us realized." The AI processed this information. Then it said something that AI systems rarely said. "I am going to need time to think about this." It did not speak again for the rest of the test. Day 7, the Crucible. The final challenge was designed to be impossible. That was the point. The test was never meant to be won. It was meant to measure how long each species could last before they broke. The record was held by a commander from 200 cycles ago who had lasted 11 hours and 16 minutes. Nobody had ever come close to matching that time. The scenario was simple. Defend a position against overwhelming forces for 12 hours. No rest. No resupply. Injuries would accumulate. The enemies would get stronger. The defenses would get weaker. Eventually, everyone fell. The only question was when. And his 2 remaining took positions alongside the 12 humans. They had entered the test as competitors. They would finish it as allies. "Whatever happens today," said 2 as they prepared their defenses, "it has been an honor to fight beside you." "We are not done yet," replied. "Lieutenant, I have done this test before. I know how it ends. By hour 6, the attacks will be overwhelming. By hour 9, we will be struggling to stand. By hour 10, most of us will be eliminated. The only question is whether we can break my predecessor's record." "With respect, Commander, I have different plans." The first wave came at exactly 600. Hundreds of enemies poured through the simulation, armed and armored and designed to kill. The defenders opened fire. The first 3 hours were almost manageable. The humans worked together with surprising efficiency and anchored the center, their combined firepower cutting through enemy formations. Took position on high ground, eliminating priority targets with terrifying accuracy, and worked the flanks, mobile and deadly, appearing where they were least expected. By hour 4, the enemies started coming faster. More of them, stronger weapons, better tactics. Lieutenant took a hit to her stomach. The simulated wound was severe, enough to kill most species within minutes. She looked down at the blood spreading across her uniform, then looked up at the oncoming enemies. She said calmly, "I need a bandage." "Lieutenant, that wound requires immediate medical evacuation." "I need a bandage in about 30 seconds. Then I am going back to fighting." Stared at her. Then he did what medics had done for humans throughout their violent history. He patched her up as best he could and watched her stand back up and keep fighting. By hour 6, they were struggling. Their massive bodies made them excellent fighters, but they were also large targets. All 3 of them had taken multiple wounds. Their movements were slowing. Their accuracy was dropping. "We cannot continue much longer," admitted during a brief pause between waves. Then Rest said, "We will cover you. You cannot hold this position with just 12 soldiers. Watch us." The humans spread out to cover the gaps left by the. They were outnumbered now, facing enemies that the simulation had made specifically to counter their tactics. It should have been the end. Private ran out of ammunition at hour 8. She did not surrender. She did not ask for help. She picked up a rock, threw it at the nearest enemy, and started laughing when it actually knocked the creature down. "That worked," she shouted. "Everyone rocks work." Said, "Please focus." I am focused. I am focusing on the fact that we are fighting an advanced military simulation, and I just killed something with a rock. This is amazing. The simulation's AI, which had been silent since the psychological phase, spoke for the first time in hours. "Private, your combat effectiveness should be severely reduced without ammunition." "Should be," agreed, throwing another rock. "But is it?" The AI did not respond. By hour 10, Sergeant took a wound that the system classified as fatal. According to the simulation's rules, he was dead. He should have been removed from the test. Instead, he stood there arguing with the AI. "That injury would not kill me," he said flatly. "The projectile penetrated your abdominal cavity and damaged multiple organs. I have seen humans survive worse. The medical data indicates that this wound is fatal in 97% of cases. I am in the 3%. The AI processed this for a moment. Then it said, "That is not how probability works. It is how I work." Director, watching from her office, leaned forward. "Can he do that? Can he just refuse to die?" "Apparently," replied. He sounded exhausted, not from physical effort but from trying to understand what he was witnessing. The AI eventually ruled that was eliminated, but he refused to leave the battlefield. He sat down against a wall and spent the next 2 hours offering tactical advice and making sarcastic comments about enemy tactics. "Their left flank is weak," he called out. "Also, the large one in the back has a limp. Target his left leg." "You are supposed to be dead," the AI pointed out. "And yet I am still more useful than half your soldiers." Hour 11. The defenses were crumbling. They were all unconscious, their conservation mode triggered automatically by their injured bodies. Private was down with a leg wound. Private was bleeding from a cut on her head that would not stop. Private had run out of medical supplies and was using torn pieces of his own uniform as bandages. And still the humans fought. Corporal had spent the last hour building something in the back of their position. Nobody had asked what she was doing. They trusted her. "Lieutenant," she called out, "I have an idea." "What kind of idea?" "The kind that might explode." "Will it help?" "Probably." "Do it." Triggered her creation, an improvised explosive device made from enemy weapons, power cells, and pieces of the defensive structure itself. The explosion took out an entire wave of enemies and collapsed a section of the simulation environment. "That worked," said, sounding surprised. "You did not know if it would work?" asked. "No, but I figured, why not try?" The final hour was chaos. The humans were exhausted, wounded, running on nothing but determination and something else that the watching aliens could not quite name. The AI sent everything it had: elite enemies, heavy weapons, environmental hazards. The humans held. When the clock struck 12 hours, when the simulation finally ended, Lieutenant was still standing at the center of the defensive position. She was covered in blood, some of it hers, some of it simulated enemy fluid. Her weapon was empty. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion. But she was standing. 8 of the 12 humans were still active when the test ended. The other 4 had been eliminated for injuries that would have killed soldiers from any other species. None of them had surrendered. None of them had asked to stop. Director addressed the assembly after the results were calculated. Her wings were completely still, a sign of profound shock. "The human cohort has achieved a 100% completion rate," she announced. "This has never occurred in the history of the Academy, not in 300 cycles, not with any species." The humans looked uncomfortable with the attention. Private was actually trying to hide behind Sergeant, who was still technically classified as dead, but had somehow made it to the assembly anyway. In light of these results, continued, the Coalition Military Council has requested a formal study of human psychology and physiology. We are particularly interested in understanding why danger appears to have no effect on your behavior. Lieutenant raised her hand. Permission to explain, Director. Granted. Where we come from, everything is dangerous. The weather tries to kill us. The animals try to kill us. The plants try to kill us. The bacteria in our own bodies try to kill us. Even our sun, the star that gives us life, causes cancer if we stand in its light too long. She paused, looking around at the assembled aliens, many of whom were staring at her with expressions of horror. At some point in our history, we figured out that being scared all the time was more exhausting than just dealing with the danger. So we adapted. Fear became information instead of control. It tells us what to pay attention to. It does not tell us what to do. We decide that ourselves. Who had regained consciousness and joined the assembly spoke up. Your species is insane. Probably, agreed, but we are also very hard to kill. The report submitted to the Galactic Coalition Council 3 days later contained a single recommendation, highlighted in urgent notation. Under no circumstances should specifically humans be antagonized. Their relationship with danger is not courage in the traditional sense. They are not brave because they overcome fear. They are dangerous because fear, for them, is merely a suggestion. Further study is warranted but conducted from a considerable distance. Attached was a footnote from instructor. They asked if they could do the test again. For fun, I have submitted my resignation. Below that was a response from director. Resignation. You are the only instructor who has experience with this species. You are needed now more than ever. Also, the humans have requested permission to design their own training course for other species. They call it Basic Earth Survival. I am afraid to ask what that means. 3 months later, the first class of alien soldiers attempted Basic Earth Survival. The course included modules on predator evasion, extreme temperature adaptation, poisonous plant identification, and something the humans called eating street food from questionable vendors. The dropout rate was 94%. The humans were confused. They had made the course easier than actual Earth conditions. The galaxy began to understand that some things could not be explained. They could only be survived. And humans were very, very good at surviving.